Welcome to the Faith and Business Podcast. I am your host, Elle Edwards, founder of the Faith and Business Playground. I'm here with mentoring, accountability, and this podcast to help you be youier, to help you embrace your inner weirdo so you can make Jesus CEO of your life and business. And as I've reminded you every day, and I will continue to remind you, we are having conversations around these podcast episodes, the writing prompts that I give you at the end of each episode. We're talking about this in more detail over in my free Facebook group. So if you're not already a member, take this as your reminder or your invitation to come and join us. Facebook.com/groups/youier Christian entrepreneur. But I will put the link to that in the show notes as well. Now, today's episode is especially for you if you've been listening along and you've been thinking, I don't know. I'm a bit stuck. I'm not sure. And so what I wanted to remind you today, and that the story I want to bring to mind to you today, is the story of the Israelites when they crossed the Red Sea. They did it a couple of times, 2 or 3 times. I can never remember which one it is. And every time I mention this, I then want to go back and fact check. And then I carry on talking and I forget to do it till the next time. So maybe this time I won't remember. I want to say, well, it's definitely at least 2 times, possibly 3 times. God parted the water. He held back the water so that the Israelites could cross on dry ground and not drown. However, one of my favorite parts about that story is that the priests, the Levites, and the people carrying the Ark of the Covenant, which was like the representation of God, they went first. And not only did they go first, if you read that account in more detail, you will see that they started, imagine that you're standing on the edge of a river. I mean, it wasn't a river, it was a great big sea. So imagine that you're on a beach and you're going to start walking into the water, okay? And God is parting the water. He is making a way clear. But there's a caveat, because he's doing it from all the way over there in the distance. He's not doing it from where you're standing. He's starting at the other side of the sea. And so we've got these priests and these Levites and these carrying this Ark of the Covenant, paddling around. And I imagine, I picture them sort of lifting up there, because they had like sort of skirty, roby things, didn't they? They weren't dresses, but they didn't have trousers, my understanding of it. So I imagine them, if you imagine you in a sort of flowing, cloaky garment of some kind, if you were going to go paddling in the water, you'd sort of hoist it up a little bit. So I have this visual picture of these priests sort of hoiking up their garment a little bit and sort of starting to paddle across this water. In other words, they had to get their feet wet. They didn't start crossing the Red Sea on dry ground. They were paddling around. It was wet. It was probably cold. Probably not as cold as the sea here in South Wales, of course, because they were there and it's much warmer there. But still, it might have been a bit, but it was certainly been wet. And so they're there paddling around in the water. God is doing a miracle all the way over there. What would have happened? Now, we don't know the answer to this question. I am surmising. But what would have happened if the Israelites had stayed on the sand? Again, I don't know if it was a sandy beach or what it quite looked like, but what if they stood still on the dry ground and they refused to budge until they had dry ground to walk on? We don't know the answer to that question. Would God have been gracious enough to part it and then they would have carried on? Who knows? But they had to get their feet wet. And everything that happens in the Bible, we're told that all scripture is God-breathed, useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness. All of that stuff is everything in the Bible. Every story that we read is there to help us grow as individuals and in our relationship with God. And so I believe that part of the story is really important, because it's a reminder to us that when you're trying stuff, when you're stepping forward on a new venture, you have to get your feet wet. That's the precedent that's already been set. God may already be doing a miracle all the way over there somewhere. You just can't see it yet. So if you're stuck there, and as it relates to you trying to embrace your inner weirdo, if you're sat there going, I don't know, I'm going to wait until I know the answer, you might be waiting a long time. And so my encouragement to you today is, if you don't know, then just start. And that is today's writing prompt, because I want to ask you, what are the areas of life or the things that you can start with? Where do you know? So if you don't know what it means for you to be the person God made you to be in every single area of your life and business, and exactly what that looks like, I would challenge that if you're telling me I don't know at all, I would challenge that. And I'd say, well, actually, that's probably not true. There will be areas of your life and or business where you are already being fully self-expressed. You are already letting your little weirdo out to play. You are already being the person God made you to be, whatever language you want to use around that. And so your writing prompt for today, the thing I want you to consider, and I would invite you to share it over in the Facebook group, the thing I want you to consider is, what areas of your life do you know already? Start there. So where in your life and business can you start being yourself? And so I gave you the example, I think it was a couple of days ago, looking back at my notes. A couple of days ago, I gave you the example of this podcast where I very consciously made the decision that unless the dog started barking or there was some major noise interruption. So for example, at the time of recording, in a few weeks' time, we're having somebody come and they're going to be like making a really big noise with a great big sort of jackhammer to break up some concrete flooring. I won't be recording the podcast that day, let's just say that, because that would be stupid. You won't be able to hear the words. However, the rest of the time, you will hear me fall over my words, because that's one area where I can be very transparent and I can just be myself. And so I like to lead by example. So that's my example of one area of my life where I like to think I am fairly you. I am myself. What you see is what you get. I have people that listen to this and they'll go, I feel like I already know you. I have conversations with people and we've never spoken before, but thanks to the podcast and, conversations we've gone on to have in the group, they feel like they already know me because I write how I talk. What you see is what you get. So the podcast for me is a very easy example of that. You will have those examples for you too. And so this ties in actually with what we talked about last week about giving you a dose of certainty. In order to give yourself a dose of certainty around this stuff, I want to encourage you to consider, where do you know? What areas of your life can you already start being you? What does that look like? And then just start. So if you don't know, just start. The Israelites had to get their feet wet, and you, as you go on this journey and do this work, will have to get your feet wet. So if you don't know, almost pick something and try it, because God knows your heart. He knows that your intentions are honorable. And even if, and I've talked about this before, and I suspect it will come up again, but even if you have the best intentions and you're genuinely trying your best, but you still kind of get it wrong, God is big enough and gracious enough and loving enough that he can redeem that situation. Like I've shared with you before, I've had situations where I've wanted to do some training, for example, and I said to God, right, if you want me to do this, then let this, and this happen. And then I waited all of about 5 seconds, and then the pieces, this, and this happened, and so I did it. Did I pause and give God space to show me an alternate route? No, I didn't. So I can't, with hindsight, looking back, I can't honestly say that doing that piece of training was what God had in mind. I did the training, it was great, and I learned things from it as a result. Was that God's intention for me? I don't know. I will never know, because I didn't give him a chance to say. However, he is big enough and loving enough to use that situation and use that training, for example, to good ends and for good purposes. And the same is true for you. And so I want you to let go of this as much as possible. Easy for me to say, I know, but as much as possible, and God helping you, let go of the fear of needing to get it all completely right. Let go of the fear of needing to know all the answers. If you don't know, just start. Try something. Because if you sit there and do nothing, you'll make no progress forward. It's far better to, yes, of course, prayerfully, alongside God, ideally, but having asked God to show you the way forward. And if you're getting those nudges, follow them. Get your feet wet. See what happens. Because if you're open to his leading, he will course correct as needs be. But if you don't start, you're never going to know. And so that reminder, and because I'm just wrapping this up, the reminder, therefore, of the writing prompt. What are the areas of your life or the things that you can start with? Start there. And if you would like to share that, do please come on over to the Faith and Business Playground group and share what comes up for you. And if you've got any questions as well. In the meantime, I shall be back tomorrow, but wishing you a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.